Great. Well, hello everybody, and thanks for coming to the first Orchard OCD Research Conference for patients and families. And I wanted to start with a big thanks, really, to Margarita for organising the whole day. I mean, it's really spectacular. Thank you, Margarita. Yeah. The microphone. Hello. Yeah, there we go. Microphone. Good. So I'm Nick. So I am the co-founder of Orchard OCD. I set this up 7 years ago with Professor Naomi Feinberg, who's here. And really the whole aim of Orchard, as I'll explain in the next few minutes, is really to advance OCD research, to kind of help with the development of new treatments and our understanding of OCD and building really the network and the infrastructure. So we're super pleased with the lineup that we've got today with really some amazing speakers, really bringing to you the latest scientific research into OCD, which is accelerating incredibly fast, which is super exciting. And they'll be explaining it to you, patients and families, really in a way that is clear and easy to understand, and hopefully it will bring you real hope on how things are developing. So this is the board of Orchard, myself as the chair, and then Professor Naomi Feinberg as the co-founder, and we have 3 other trustees, many with lived experience of OCD, Pete Chan, Sean Fletcher, who you might have heard of, who's a TV journalist who did a panorama a few years ago on mental health and adolescence and all that, and also Neil, who is a mental health activist. And then we have Margarita, who is our member of staff and who is also doing a PhD that we are funding on the overlap between trauma and OCD, which is a very under-researched area, but absolutely crucial. So a bit about myself. I've had OCD for 35 years, since the age of 17, and it took me 10 years to eventually get a diagnosis. I self-diagnosed and took myself to the doctor, and then, I've been through various forms of CBT, EMDR, schemotherapy, everything you can imagine, SSRIs, and I'm now on clomipramine. And so my real keen interest is really advancing the science and getting us really to develop new treatments for this pretty horrific mental disorder. And I also run a support group in Cambridge, which is affiliated to OCD Action of people with severe OCD. This is our scientific advisory board. We have Professor Trevor Robbins, who's here from the University of Cambridge, who is the chair of a scientific advisory board and who will be giving a talk this morning. And then we have Sabine Kahn, Susanna Mari, Dr. Lynn Drummond, Caroline Rodriguez, Jim Hagan, and David Adams. So a really good scientific advisory board. And they are the ones who give us scientific advice and also who do the independent peer review when we do calls for proposals. So far we've done 2 calls for proposals. And hopefully we'll be doing more once we've fundraised for them. A little bit about our research projects, which I think are very exciting. The first one, which I'm sure you've all come across, is of psilocybin for OCD. And when we set up Orchard in 2017, one of the first things that we did, Professor Feinberg actually introduced me to Professor David Nutt. And we were very interested, and he was just starting to look at psilocybin for OCD. So when we did our call for proposals in 2019, we had around 35 proposals from around the world, really high level. And his actually came first, which we're very excited about. So we then did a crowdfunding campaign, and we got also a donor, and we provided £120,000 to this. And it's gone really well. And Professor Feinberg and Professor Nutt are publishing soon the results of this study. So that's really exciting. Our next study was transcranial direct current stimulation. Professor Feinberg will be talking more about this. This is really exciting because this is a very small medical device. You can see it there, okay? And this was a study that Professor Feinberg did at the University of Hertfordshire. And I find it very exciting because they detected a real signal in this, and Professor Feinberg will say more about this. What's exciting about it is that it's portable, it's inexpensive, and can potentially be used at home. So Orchard is now part of a consortium that is applying for funds to do a much larger study, to really show clinical efficacy, which I think is super exciting because it's non-invasive and, very portable, and, hopefully we'll be able to prove that it really does work. So this is absolutely excellent. And then our third study is at the University of Chicago under a very eminent scientist called Professor John Grant, who's been studying OCD. He has a clinic there. He's been studying it for decades and done many pharmacological treatments. And this was our second call for proposals. And again, we had many applications, and he came first. And he had done previously a study of tolcapone. So tolcapone is a very old drug developed in the 80s, and it was used for Parkinson's disease. I think it was a co-therapy with L-Dopa. And the problem is that there is some liver toxicity with L-Dopa in a few kind of cases and all that. So it's not widely used. But what Professor John Grant really wanted to look at was the kind of mechanism of action, so it works on dopamine dysregulation. And he showed in a 2-week study that there was a reduction in OCD symptoms. So we are funding him to do a much longer study over 8 weeks and all that. And he's also linked a genetic mutation to, whether people respond or not to the drug. So this is really exciting. And if it works, could potentially be used as a kind of, second or third line treatment or whatever, as long as there's kind of the monitoring. For liver and stuff. So this is really exciting. And then our fourth project is Margarita. So she is doing a PhD. She's just finished, I think, her first year on the overlap between trauma and OCD, which is really important. I mean, this comes up quite often in my support group, So, I mean, a lot of our members, have had traumatic incidents like bullying in childhood or traumatic incidents later in life that have either exacerbated or triggered their OCD. And so Margarita is really looking at this. And very excitingly, actually, is looking at a Tetris intervention. So this is the game, Tetris, So we were introduced a few weeks ago to a group who have been studying the use of Tetris in PTSD. So basically what they found is that, people with PTSD, I don't know exactly how it works. I'm sure Margarita can explain a bit further. But if you use Tetris, after a traumatic incident or when you kind of trigger the traumatic memories or whatever, it seems to disrupt, the way the memories are then laid or whatever. And so what Margarita is going to test is whether this also works for trauma with OCD or OCD with trauma. So really exciting because everyone loves playing Tetris. So actually the barriers to adoption are pretty low. But obviously we have to prove that it really does work. And then also what we're trying to do is help all scientists out there to raise funds. And so part of that is actually convincing funders that OCD is important. I mean, we all know that here. We all know what a devastating illness it is. And we all know that majority of people in society think it's just a quirk of personality, that it's just about lining up your pencils and, being a bit organized, which, I explain to people, it's a million times worse than that. And so what we did last year is we worked with a company called Costello Medical, who are based in Cambridge, and they're awesome because they have a pro bono department where they provide free assistance to charities and patient groups. And they did this study for us looking at the cost of OCD to society and the economy in the UK. So a really rigorous piece of work, and then it was then published in Comprehensive Psychiatry. And a very conservative estimate was that it was costing around 5 billion. And actually, if you keep reading, it's probably closer to 10 billion. So that's absolutely huge. And what we encourage all our, scientists and all that to do is to put that in their funding applications to help funders understand that there is a huge economic cost actually to OCD, And that is one of the other reasons why we should be really dealing with it, as well as the human suffering. And then later on today, we're going to also talk about the research registry that we've set up. This is really important. One of the big barriers, for research is recruiting patients. And this is for all kinds of research, whether that's clinical trials, whether that's questionnaires, etc. So we set up with the University of Hertfordshire a research registry where we've now got several hundred patients who've registered, who give a little bit of information about their OCD, and then they say what kind of studies they're interested, and then we match the studies to the patients and all that, and that improves recruitment. So we'll say a bit more about that. But just a little bit about the program before I hand over to Professor Robbins. So you'll see, it's a pretty fantastic venue. We're super pleased with it. So Professor Robbins is going to start by talking about the neural and neurochemical basis of OCD, which personally I find utterly fascinating. Then after that, Professor Amy Milton, also from the University of Cambridge, is going to talk about excessive checking in OCD, particularly the RAP model of OCD that they have developed there, which is an absolutely excellent model and very translatable to the human condition. Then we have Dr. Amita Jasi, who's going to talk about family accommodation of symptoms, so helping the family to support their loved ones with OCD, because as you probably know, OCD doesn't just affect the individual, but the whole family starts to get affected by OCD. Then we have Dr. Anna Maria de Souza, very exciting, talking about EEG, so that's electroencephalography. So those kind of things they put on your head to to kind of detect brain waves and things like that, and how that can help us detect and treat OCD. And this is fascinating because this is very important for the development of new treatments and therapies. Then we have a break, and then Margarita's going to tell us about the relationship between trauma and OCD, which I've already mentioned, so the research that she's been doing. Then Dr. Elena Pampaloni, going to talk about a compass for empowering your weight and maximizing self-help in OCD treatment while navigating NHS care. That is an issue that comes up every single time in my support group, how to navigate NHS care. So how to advocate for yourself and your family members, to your GP, to the psychologist, to the psychiatrist, how to get specialist treatments and all that kind of stuff. And then really we're talking about deep brain stimulation by Dr. Himanshu Tyagi. Again, this is absolutely fascinating because Dr. Tyagi is at the back, and DBS works really well actually in OCD. We have one of our volunteers who was part of Dr. Tyagi's study 10 years ago, and for whom it's just transformed her life and stuff. So that's really interesting. Then we have a lunch break, and then we're coming back. Professor Feinberg is going to talk about emerging treatment developments for OCD. So you'll see there's lots of new things really developing. Then Professor Veal is their role for diet in OCD, very important, and I was just speaking to Professor Sahakian, who's got a book coming out about how to improve brain function, and she was telling me that diet is very important for this. Then we have a panel discussion, which will be led by OCD Action, with whom we're very good friends, about why is research so powerful when it's designed in partnership with lived experience patients. And then we have an afternoon break, and then we have what I think is absolutely crucial part of the day, which is where we come together in groups, and basically you as patients and families, we're going to be asking you what is important for you for the research that we're doing, because we really want to ground our plans and our research in the lived experience of our patients and our families. And then finally, we'll round up about the OCD registry, and then a little bit of a Q&A. So thank you very much. So I'll invite Professor Robbins. Thank you.